Okay, let's see if we can avoid any bear interruptions this morning and actually get some reasonable amounts of coffee down. So I've been sitting here doing my edits and drinking coffee. I actually got to have 2 cups of coffee unlike yesterday. Quiet night, but unfortunately I'm really behind on edits. I mean, yesterday morning I couldn't do anything because I kind of had to get out of there because I was worried that bear was going to get braver and braver the longer I was there. And I can't afford to sit around here for another hour or two. Unfortunately, I kind of need to get going to keep my options open. So this campsite is a little less established than the last one. A lot of the ground under all these leaves looks like it has wild hog damage, I'm guessing. I guess I'm that far south now. Also, I have no idea why there is that styrofoam brick there. The bear hang cables are back behind that. I was in a hurry. I managed to find something that's a reasonable slope. I actually prefer a little bit of a slope like this, so I don't have to worry that my head is down if I'm exactly flat. I sometimes feel like I'm inverted a little bit. It's just if it's enough of a slope where me or my pad starts sliding that way, then I have trouble sleeping. I will say, stealth camping your way across America a couple of times does tend to make you slightly less picky when it comes to campsites. Lots of that. So at the moment, my original permit was for North Shore, which is around 10 miles away from here, maybe a little more. I obviously want to do more than that. I don't know if I have it in me to make it to the AT and outside of the restriction area, but if things go well, I quite well might. I have met a number of people who were doing various hikes and were basically not worrying about the permit. That is not really what I'm willing to do, just because, I mean, if I was leading like a Sierra Club group or something out here and I had booked out this campsite only for my entire group, took every slot only to have some rando show up, I would not be happy. Even if I would argue I am one of the better randos to share a campsite with, because I just want to be off by myself and quiet. So the only reason I was comfortable coming here was I was able to get 1 bar of signal, and Jen checked and there was nobody booked here, so we figured it was good. There was also a lakeside campsite. I think it was 74 I could have hiked out to. It was showing 2 spots available out of 12, so I kind of figured that might be very similar to Forney Creek last night. And honestly, yesterday felt really good. I mean, I was exhausted in the morning because I didn't sleep much, possibly because I kept waking up due to the bear. Still don't know. It could have been moving around my tent, or I could have been waking myself up paranoid that there was something moving around the tent. But the hiking was really pleasant, really easy. Got to chat with folks right up until the point I got to Forney and I realized, yeah, no, not staying there. And then I did kind of have to push it after that, and I had full water because I didn't know where I was going to end up, if there was going to be water along the way or anything. But that was the first 20+ mile day I think I've done since I've been back out here post-medical stuff. And once I set up camp, I barely made it through dinner before I passed out. Sleep of the dead sort of thing, which is nice. I have been having some struggles since I've been back out. My just kind of anxiety, which is unusual for me being out in a tent after all these years. My guess is the gut pain tended to come on / get worse at night. And there were multiple times where I was alone and I wasn't sure I could take the pain, and I wasn't sure what I could do to get help. So my guess is it's just PTSD from that. Regardless, it was nice to have a good solid sleep last night. I've also started really feeling the shorter days all of a sudden. If I'm doing 15 miles, no big deal, and plenty of time, especially if I need to edit videos a bit in the morning. But it's now only getting light at like 7, I think. Pretty late, because I got up yesterday at like 5 and I was in the dark for a good while. So I think this is the lake made by Fontana Dam. I don't know, it only shows up on some of my maps, oddly enough. The one Dennis made me, I don't think it's even visible. So in cases like this is where the requirements to maintain the videos as I go start kind of pushing into my hiking day. Because if I was going to get caught up this morning, I probably wouldn't have been out of camp until 10. And again, I have done that. I did that the shelter night just because I wanted to be caught up and I had stuff to do. But considering I do not have a permit at the moment and I don't know where I'm going to stop, and there is a possibility that I may have to push it out past Fontana Dam to where I can just camp blessedly dispersed on the Appalachian Trail, I figured I better get out as early as I could. So I did a first pass on the video yesterday while I was drinking my coffee, and now I am moving. Also, that campsite I passed by yesterday was obviously where they had stopped cutting blowdowns, because I had seen evidence of chainsaw crews before that, and now I've had to crawl under and over and hike down the occasional ravine to get around some blowdowns in this section. Hasn't been too bad. And I mean, I kind of expect that sort of thing on quieter, lesser done trails. You get something like the AT, it's less usual, though. There was some sort of a storm in 21 in this one area of Pennsylvania, because I just remember there were live trees that had been knocked over. Like, we thought a tornado must have gone through there or something like that. And everybody was just lost in the foliage, trying to stay roughly where far outside the trail was. But in general, you know, busy trail, PCT, AT, far less of those blowdowns. CDT, whole different ballgame. You know, the logo, if the logo for the Appalachian Trail shows shelters, this, I always joke, the CDT one should show blowdowns on it. Cellular connectivity has been kind of limited for a while on this. Normally not that big of an issue. I do have the inReach as a backup if I need logistics stuff, but since I'm kind of changing plans here and also had some things like the bear I wanted to share with Jen, I keep trying. It seems like there's 2 cell towers here. One of them has 1 bar and is functional sometimes. A few times I have picked up like 3 bars of 5G, but every time it is a strong signal that does not seem to have any internet connectivity, which does happen sometimes. I've seen broken cell towers and whatnot. We used to have one in the Eastern Sierra that was on the wrong time zone for some reason, caused havoc on a few trips, because if your phone connected, it would literally like jump an hour from the correct time, which is an issue if you're trying to meet everybody at 7 a.m., say. Jen has been going through a wilderness first aid recertification that I'm forcing her to do for the wilderness class. Wilderness first aid, if you have not done it, is an amazing thing. Everybody should do it if they're outdoors a good amount. However, oh, hello. As I was saying before the turkey encounter, wilderness first aid is amazing. The first 2 times I was blown away and I enjoyed every second. The third and the fourth time, it was like, oh, okay, this is getting a little repetitive. And now I have had to do it 6 or 7 times. So it has become somewhat of a chore, to the point where I'm less focused on the material. I mean, it's a refresher, and refreshers are good, but I more end up sitting there contemplating a bunch, oh, when I did this provider, they did it this way versus this. Because I have done 3 different providers of wilderness first aid. And like I said, the first couple of times it was kind of eye-opening, especially because I'd had an experience where we ran into somebody that was having some sort of an event out in the backcountry and felt like we didn't have the tools to really help them. We got them out and they were okay, but it's amazing how that changes your view. And I've had to go through some, you know, major first aid / crisis incidents out in the backcountry both myself, participants, and just coming across other people. But I mean, the classes spend a lot of time hammering on the basics, and the basics are getting kind of repetitive at this point. The most fun I have is actually chatting with the instructors when I have one that has a background in like really long wilderness stuff. Like the guy I liked the most out of Idlewild, John Jacobs, he had taught for Outward Bound, where they do 30-day trips. So some of the material they cover is kind of hilariously non-applicable when you're doing Sierra Club trips. They're 2 or 3 days. I've never really had to diagnose a pregnancy in a wilderness first aid context. But, you know, you're on a 30-day thing. Stuff like that can crop up. Wilderness first aid, though, usually boils down to, you know, if there's anything life-threatening like bleeding, okay, deal with that. Try and mitigate the pain, and then get a plan for patching him up and getting him out if at all possible. If not, hit the button, send a runner, and get somebody more qualified. Because we just have a limited tool set when we're out here. So between wilderness first aid, out near Warner Springs, actually, where we were this past summer, and her core power yoga thing, which is now done, Jen has been doing a fair amount of extracurricular classes. It is probably self-evident from the videos that things got a lot less remote a little while after Deep Creek. I don't really have that much context for the Smokies other than what I did on the AT. I mean, I had not ever been aware of Smoky Mountain National Park, and I was kind of shocked when I got out here and a trail angel was saying, oh yeah, most visited national park in the country. Because, you know, you say national park, I'm thinking like Zion, Yellowstone, Glacier, hey, more bear poop, things like that. This is marked as the Lakeshore Trail, so Benton MacKaye overlaps with that. Don't know how accessible it is. I did see some people yesterday that looked like they had not come in that far. If anything, I was a little too blasé on this section, and I should have done my usual backup of having a Gaia map. I had just been considering when I was sitting there struggling to sleep the other night when we had every reason to believe we might have a problematic bear encounter. It's like, okay, not really worried about getting hurt, but if my pack got shredded or tent was damaged, what's my bailout to get out and fix this? And I had bailouts, but like the nearest one was actually either backtracking to Smokemont or continuing forward to where that tunnel was. Which, you know, fine for me, but that couple, I think they had to hike out in a pair of Chacos. Originally, when the guy came over that night and he said his shoes were missing, he was intending to hike out in flip-flops, and then the flip-flops were stolen also because they left those right outside their tent, and the bear was brave enough to grab them. Which just goes to show, I mean, I see people camping, usually in the busier spots, and they have like clothes hung up over here, their trekking poles are over here, this, that, and the other is over here. And I am very compact. Partially that comes from the fact that a lot of the campsites I have used over the last however many years have been less than established, often less than legal. See, you know, the ADT, where legal camping doesn't exist, so you're stealth camping. So usually everything is either inside the tent or immediately outside. My trekking poles, because I have been burned enough by having participants getting the handles chewed in the Sierra by deer and other things, they are on the ground right outside the door. The only reason I don't have them inside is I don't like collapsing them, because I wear them out and they'll get stuck, and I worry about poking a hole in the bottom of the tent. But yeah, beyond that, everything is as close to me as possible, because I find that dissuades rodents and other critters in general. I mean, I have had the occasional issue. See, last year in Colorado, where my flip-flops ended up being dragged off into some little hole and I had to retrieve them, and then I had busted flip-flops for the rest of that trip. If things are just sopping, soaking wet, they do go outside the tent, but my pack is usually inside the tent right up against me. If it's too wet to do that, it is under the vestibule right up against the outside of the tent, just as close as possible. Because if anything is going to mess with it, I want to be aware and be able to do something. I have had the experience, I'm sure everybody's had, where you wake up and you're kind of aware something is going on, but not to the point where you can think a coherent thought. I think that was what happened the night my flip-flops got taken. I was aware of something moving right out there, but not aware enough to, grab the flip-flops and bring them inside before I lost them. As with a lot of this stuff, you kind of adjust over time based on experiences, and everybody is kind of at very different places based on their own experience. I know people that never camp outside of very established, planned out spots, and they have a very different set of procedures. I have also been kind of surprised a couple of times talking to other people that do long distance stuff and kind of thinking, chatting with them about gear and going, oh yeah, and how do you solve like XYZ that I deal with? And realizing that, even if you're doing the same trails, even if you're doing a lot of long stuff, often people have very different experiences, partially due to choices. I have had very generous offers from people who were willing to drive along with an RV and give me a place to stop and feed me constantly on my trips. And while I was blown away at the generosity, it just kind of took away too much from why I was out here. So I've always said no. I've run into people who have leaned on that a good amount, or, my gear gets beat up, but I set up my tent a lot. If you are out on the AT and bouncing hostel to hostel, huge difference between your pack getting dragged through the dirt and brush every night and sitting on a nice carpet somewhere. So I always find it interesting. I'm always interested in hearing, other experiences or gears people have tried when they've really been beating stuff up, since then it might apply to me. But often my circumstances are just a little too selective. I mean, heck, the amount of batteries I carry is way more than most people. And I know some really accomplished hikers that make do on, like a 5K battery, and their phone lasts for days, but they're also not recording 30 minutes a day or trying to do edits on trail. And again, certain trails where the trail is really easy to follow, see the AT, where, if you manage to get lost on the AT, you should probably get some sort of an award, considering how many blazes there are. You can turn your phone off and you don't have to navigate constantly. Versus if I had tried that on even the CDT, considering how bad things were up in the Bob and whatnot when we went through. I might have been able to make it through on just like a map and compass, but a lot of the fine nav and trying to actually stay on the trail corridor gets difficult. Don't mind me, I'm just face planting in webs. Eating the occasional spider will give me a little extra protein this morning, I guess. I do occasionally get the hipster, I only use paper map and compass, that's superior. Everything, GPS to phone is just a gadget and unreliable. And I mean, I get where that comes from. I have taught map and compass navigation for Sierra Club for however many years, since it has been since 2009, because it is part of our off-trail leadership rating. So you have to evaluate new leaders navigating just that way. However, Jen and I have been talking about how a lot of our focus on pure map and compass is more based on organizational drag versus it actually being applicable. The core skills matter. I tell everybody that my goal is to, by the end of the class, have them able to read a topo map. And if I have done that and all they know how to do with the compass is check their makeup, apply sunscreen, yada yada, then I've done a good job. because you can nav on it. You can do, especially out west where you have landforms and things, you can generally follow a route. But when you get into areas, oh, spider again. I don't know if that was visible on trail, but there was a spider like that big that wrapped around my head and was riding on my ponytail. Anyway, so in kind of ideal going during the daytime or having landforms you can nav, map and compass works. Even in that sort of terrain, it gets a lot more challenging at night. And when you need to do really kind of micro nav because you're going around, you know, canyons or other things that could block your way, or you're trying to follow a trail corridor, it's a lot more limited than electronic. I know all the arguments about, oh, well, phones can fail, batteries can run out. The reality is I've seen more paper map and compass failures than I have phones, personally. I've had people lose the map, sweat through the map in one case. I was helping somebody learn nav, gave them my map, and they sweated and completely obliterated the entire thing. I have seen compasses demagnetize, which means you have a hunk of plastic and a lanyard and nothing you can do with it. The needle can get jammed, the little reservoir can break. You know, everything has a failure point. The reality is I have seen modern phones survive a whole heck of a lot, even before they used to advertise them as waterproof. I have seen people drop them into streams and they still worked. You know, impact resistance of your average case. You can break them. I mean, I have seen some horrific things where you can actually see the electronics coming through the smashed screen because it went face down on the rocks repeatedly or something. But in general, I have found them to be pretty durable. These days, the thing I've come through to is I usually have a software backup, meaning if I'm using far out, I usually have a Gaia map or a Venza or something else I can access especially if I'm going to be out of touch for an extended period. I also have a separate device that can be used in emergencies. The InReach isn't the best. It's not going to show you a map, but you can do general kind of like headings and communicate. And if I had to, I could message Jen one letter at a time and get some indication of, am I headed the right way or do I need to turn? Wouldn't be ideal, but again, you got to keep in mind on most of these trails, you aren't that far into the wilderness. If I was on a Shackleton style expedition, I would plan differently. I would make sure several of my compatriots were plump and bathed a lot, you know, just in case. But when we did the Yukon planning, for example, there we had to be a little more failure adverse, so we made some different decisions. But you see some people who go on, like the Appalachian Trail is the middle of the Yukon, and keep in mind, people have done the entire AT as a through hike and never stayed in a tent. That is how accessible you are everywhere, including the 100-mile wilderness. You can still have things go wrong. I have had some pretty horrific things requiring a helicopter, 3 miles from a trail. If you can't walk, you can't walk, but you are 3 miles from a trail. It is a huge difference between that and 30 miles from any sort of help. And like even here, if I broke my leg, I might be waiting hours, but I'm not going to be sitting here for days without anybody coming by. So these days, if we didn't have kind of the organizational drag in the wilderness class, Jen and I would probably go more in the direction of Gaia GPS and just teaching kind of how to read the map and not just relying on the GPS dot and backups and ins and outs of certain bits of software. Because like I said, reading a topo map is still a core skill. But while I do carry a compass, sometimes I find less and less use for it other than teaching, and occasionally it is kind of the best thing for picking out a peak in the distance from a summit. See, the great thing about me talking on video for however many hours, for however many hundreds of videos and however many years, is when I'm invariably have some sort of major incident somewhere, somebody's going to be able to find a really great video to make me look even dumber than I am. So hey, there is always that, right? So when it comes to hiking trails, like this one's fairly established. I have been on ones that are very remote, very hard to follow, where you're bushwhacking for long periods of time. And you hear stories about certain other people that have done said trail and how far off the actual corridor they were due to navigational issues / not using a GPS. And a lot of people are a lot more flexible on that. For me, if I'm going to do a trail, I want to do the route that was intended. If all I wanted to do was walk from A to B, you know, I can probably get a AAA road map and just walk the side of it. See what happens for a lot of ADT folks where, you know, you can cut 2,000 miles off the ADT if you just stick to roads instead of the trail corridor. In typical fashion, I have not had many views of the lake. Pretty foliage though. Seems like I'm getting the color change again. I am fully expecting that by the time I get further south, a lot of the leaves will have dropped, which means stealth camping gets a lot trickier because you don't have foliage to hide in. When things green up in spring, that was when my life got significantly easier, camping-wise at least. Of course, never a campsite when you need it, and then when you don't, they're every 2 miles. Also, about a mile back, all of a sudden I went from single track on a hillside with blowdowns to what is visibly an old roadbed that was headed down to the lake. There is another cemetery marked out here. I need to remember to look that up when I'm out because there's nothing on it far out about it. But there were these symbols on the maps I started seeing. And then with that encounter yesterday, I finally realized what they are. Okay, I know I said I was ish in a hurry, but I was too curious. I'm hiking up to the marked cemetery behind Kirkland campsite. So these haven't been marked with any signage on trail, which is unusual. Normally I've seen a lot of cemeteries like this that are marked, but they do have signs that say no horses for whatever reason. Huh. And they're obviously maintained. It looked like there were the remains of an old cabin back there. I wonder if those same people yesterday come out to all of these. So the only dates I've seen here are 1800s. Okay, curiosity fulfilled. There were no no trespassing signs. There was no marker as far as the history. There were some retaining walls and what looked like could have been the platform of an old building, but that was it. And this particular one might be the biggest hill I have to do all day. So yeah, that's it as far as signage. I've been seeing those and kind of assumed maybe they were campsites I just didn't have marked on far out. I didn't get a map layer that had all the campsites. I just went with the Benton MacKaye set of far out. Oh, I am so tempted to just go for Fontana Dam. I just don't want to wreck my feet or anything and then have to rehab for days after that. Hey, safety stick. So I took a quick break and I looked at the map a little bit. I've already come 4 or 5 miles, but realistically trying to pull off getting over Fontana Dam and then getting far enough where I can figure out a campsite in the dark and all probably isn't the most likely to succeed. So officially I'm an aim for Lost Cove. That'll make a 19-mile day from where I camped last night. I will hopefully get reception between here and there so I can double check there's a permit slot, maybe have done change mine officially. However, it is described as a large site with several private smaller sites. Now granted, I kind of thought that's what I was aiming for yesterday, and we see how that happened, but oh well. That does look like it is the last/first campsite along the BMT here. The next option would be the Fontana Dam shelter/Fontana Hilton, and that is way too road accessible. That always has people there, and I'm not sharing a shelter for anything short of an abject emergency. So I'm just gonna keep moving and see how things fall, but officially that is my goal for today, and that is probably more realistic. If I start pushing really hard days, I end up with some sort of blister, chafe, etc. Especially down here where humidity is kind of noticeable. I actually had to switch out of my shirt last night when I got to camp because it was just so soaked. That is partially why I so dislike these kind of enforced campsite hikes. Because like take Glacier last year, or I guess it's been a couple of years ago. Take Glacier whenever I started the CDT up there. I had areas where I was really struggling due to foot issues, due to chafe issues, etc. And normally about the only thing that works for me at a certain point I can't mitigate. So I just have to stop, heal up overnight, and then continue on the next day. And often that is enough where I can recover. However, if it starts happening, at mile 7 and you have to go 10 more miles because you have to get to your one campsite. And, I can book them really conservatively. That's kind of what we did with these campsites, but that can chafe also. We had days out there where we had like 7 miles to get to camp. And we thought, okay, well, hey, that'll work. And then what happens? Grizzly Buffet, and we had to do a 30-some mile road walk on like the 3rd day. Good times. If you want to know how good the water's been through here, I am actually carrying 0 liters at the moment, which I almost never do. Well, crap. I went the wrong way. Found a bunch of park benches, and I'm like, yeah, this seems like it would be marked if it was anything, but man, that is low. I guess this should have been my clue. I was off course because this is like a road barrier, I think. See, that's what I get if I lose myself too much sometimes. Walk right past the obvious thing. Oh, taters would be happy. Bushwhacking out here for a bathroom spot or other things is not the greatest. There are these things which don't really stand out that much from a distance, but they have spikes on them. So at best, they end up dragging over my skin, and I got some fun cuts across my shin. So I'm a little less caffeinated. I also managed to get internet back at that waterfall enough where I could check a couple of things. So I'm realistically not making it out of Smoky Mountain National Park today. Even if I did, which I mean physically I probably could, I don't know how close to Fontana Shelter I could find a stealth camp. It looks like the trail is a little close to like Fontana Lodge and a couple other things for a while. So my 2 realistic camp options for tonight are either Possum Hollow or Lost Cove. Lost Cove, I will not be the only one there. It looks like there are 6 spots taken and 10 available, whereas Possum Hollow, at least at the moment, it would be just me. I know which of those I would tend to lean towards. I just kind of am enjoying hiking, and I hate having to cut it short. And unfortunately, at least from what I've seen, there is no real indicator, okay, if there are 6 spots taken and 10 available, that could just be like that one I went by last night where there's a giant area and you've got 2 groups of 3 that are maybe not being the most considerate, and the site is kind of a nightmare. Or it could be a single group of 6 that's, you know, being quiet and they're in one area and I would be off at a private spot. It's just kind of a crapshoot. So at least for the moment, I'm just going to get to Possum Hollow and see how things fall. My ideal would actually be something between Lost Cove and Fontana Dam, but doesn't, at least the map I have, it doesn't show anything there. It was nice getting to hike into the evening yesterday. It is also an absolutely lovely day today, at least as near as I can tell from the glimpses I've gotten out across like the lake ever since the fog broke this morning. It looks spectacular. Blue sky, fluffy clouds, and of course for me back here in the woods, pretty much no view. So interestingly, the trail does keep going between like slanted single track where I got to go slower and then old road bed like this. I'm not sure how much of it is drivable. It seems like some sections of this haven't been connected to anything, at least anymore, but you can at least see the tread marks. I'm always impressed by how pretty it is out here when I can see further than, 50, 60 feet. That is not even a camp on my map. So despite the crowds last night, I only ran into one person today, and that was a BMT section hiker that was just going as far as Smoky. Unfortunately, I may have given him the wrong info. I told him Deep Creek was where the problem bear was, but I may have misremembered which side of Smoky that was on. So hopefully the rangers are on top of it and are putting signs out there. Gonna say, I'm kind of surprised this place hasn't been more trash considering where it is, but yeah, there you go. This is why we can't have nice things. I do, however, approve of chairs. The world really needs more chairs in it. I really should be going. This is just damn nice, though. This is a cool little stop, and there is actually a campsite right over there. I think it's called Proctor Fields. So I am 11 miles and change from the end of Smoky Mountain National Park, and a return to camping sanity. I would be damn tempted to go that far tonight, except that puts me in Fontana Dam, and all I remember is the shelter there. So I, at the moment, am leaning towards Possum Hollow. That is in another 1.8 miles or so. It is a smaller site. If there is somebody there, then I will probably roll the dice, continue on another 3 miles or so, and then that's where Lost Cove is. So there's the Proctor Field campsite. Looks like there is probably somebody there. Looks like one bag hung. I will say that shuttle driver back at the start did seem to be correct when he said this is a lot quieter than the Appalachian Trail corridor. It's really just that one campsite I had the bad judgment to try and do last night. I am just really looking forward to being able to look forward to the end of the day and not have to stress about being able to, get my own space to myself, / not have to worry about smokers, music, yada yada. This one was closer, so I did a little side trip. Okay. Moment of truth again. I think I'm staying here for the night, but who knows? Okay. Looks kind of similar to yesterday's camp. Not the flattest, but does seem quiet. Well, I guess one way to look at it is it's a positive sign that I'm kind of like bummed about stopping early after, 16 miles. Easier miles though. Long trail start was way harder than this. But still felt like a good day. No matter what, I'm finishing Smoky Mountain National Park tomorrow, so me stopping early here basically is just giving me the opportunity to stay in a campsite alone instead of dealing with a bigger site that almost guaranteed has people in it. It does say something about my experiences in this section, that every time I find something that seems like a slightly more remote tent spot, I'm always looking around, just making sure there's not a bunch of partially covered cat holes. For the record, the best L&T talk I have ever heard, which is given by a female ranger in Mineral King, and the one that I personally repeat to students, is you should bury your cat holes deep enough that you feel comfortable sleeping on them. The argument being the places that humans like to sleep and the places that humans like to dig cat holes have a lot of similarities, and there tends to be overlap. So even if somebody else shows up, I will have enough separation that I will be perfectly happy. Well, as long as they're not blaring music. Anyway, this looks like it'll work for the night. I have not had reception since Jen was asking some questions about booking Fontana. So we'll see. I think I have a town day tomorrow, but never know what's going to happen. Home sweet home. 7 o'clock, still just me up here. I have eaten. I am pretty much ready to seal up. So far, just me and apparently hogs up here. I haven't seen any of them, but I see a lot of the diggings all around. And there were some far out comments about them running through camp. I've been around them in Florida and other places, and at least so far haven't had an issue. I did hear from Jen, and she apparently has me booked at Fontana Inn tomorrow. At least that's what it sounds like. So should have a nice easy day, and then I can resupply, get cleaned up, and then run screaming off into the remainder of this trail without all the park restrictions. Ironically, I'll sometimes get more nervous about town days than I will of average days on trail. Because on trail, good, bad stuff is what it is. Sometimes you go into town though, and like the only option is expensive. It's one of those where if it's like one of the private room places, you can't breathe without hearing everybody around you. And yeah, I appreciate the showers and everything, but end of the day, I'd rather be out here. And as you can see, I am on full bear precaution mode. The only ones of us at that camp the other night that didn't get their shoes stolen were those of us that had them inside the tent. So I'm doing that at least till I'm out of this area.